Hi! I just strung these two rackets with 16 gauge natural gut, and I plan to string these two in 17 gauge in preparation for a 4-week playtest and review. With the support of the International Alliance of Racket Technicians and N.G. Gut, I'm bringing you this video to introduce a natural gut called NG PROV5 Plus, and I'll compare it to Babolat VS Touch. Alright, let's get into it. While I work on my playtest and review, check out the link below if you'd like to learn more about the IART, an organization for those with a true passion and dedication for the craft of racket service. I also provided a link to the N.G. Gut website to learn more about their natural gut strings. If you didn't get a chance to check out N.G. Gut's website, here are some things that it mentions about the PROV5 Plus natural gut. And they do have two other natural guts, and this is their top of the line and most durable. It's molecular coated and custom machine manufactured with pinpoint accuracy. It claims to be as good as or better than Wilson, Luxilon, and Babolat. Fraying is virtually eliminated, satisfying the most demanding stringers and highest performing players. And then it goes on to mention, because of NG's quality commitment to customer satisfaction, they have grown through word of mouth, eliminating all of their marketing costs and allowing them to charge less than half compared to their competitors. All right, so now let's take a look at the strings, and looking at the packaging, it's a nice vacuum packed package, so that's good. I was looking to find out where it's made. It doesn't say anywhere on the packaging. It does offer this string in from 15 to 19 gauge, and this is the 17 gauge in the 1.25. So I'm going to go ahead and open it and take a look at what it looks like, and we're going to weigh it, and I'll measure the gauge, and we'll compare it to the Babolat VS Touch. So when you open the package, it does come in two 6-meter lengths, which is about 19.8 feet. So we're going to go ahead and weigh it and just compare it to see if there's any difference in the weight compared to a Babolat VS Touch. So this one's coming in at 19.9 grams. And we'll go ahead and weigh the Babolat VS Touch, also in the same gauge. And of course, this comes in one string length of 12 meters. And this one is at 20.4, so it's about 0.5 grams heavier. Not that that matters too much, but I just was curious. Now, before I measure it, let's take a look at the appearance, and there's definitely a noticeable difference. So you can see that this is the VS Touch, and this is the PROV5 Plus. So this one's definitely a more yellowish amber color, and this is a more whitish, clearish color. All right, so next I'm going to take measurements of the gauge to track consistency. And I'll go ahead and take 3 measurements, one on both ends of the string and another one somewhere in the middle of the string set. So this first one came in at 1.26. I'll take the other end, 1.26, and I'll grab somewhere in the middle of the string set and measure that. So this one came in at 1.26 millimeters. I'll go to do the same with the VS Touch. I'll grab one end, the other end, and the middle. Okay, this one's at 1.27. And 1.27. So the Babolat VS Touch was 0.01 millimeters thicker, and this came at 1.26. So that made sense that this one was a little bit heavier. All right, so the next thing is we're going to get them strung in a racket. I've installed 3 main strings so far, and I'm about to tension this string, but I wanted to point out something that's very noticeable, that this string is very susceptible to ghosting. And it's not from the string clamp or the tension head, it's just by tensioning. So if you take a look at these strings that I already installed right here, you'll notice that the color of the string is a lot more almost opaque looking. It's not as translucent as this string that doesn't have any tension yet. So I'm going to go ahead and pull tension on this string, and you'll notice that this string will actually turn into this color. So let's take a look at that. So you can see how it's turning whitish, and yeah, so that's something that I noticed right away. It doesn't happen to the Babolat VS Touch, so I'm going to go ahead and proceed stringing the mains, and if I notice anything else, I'll point it out. Well, here's something I noticed when I was tying off, and I completed the both tie-offs on the mains. I know this has that molecular coating, and with the Babolat VS, the knot tails just stay more intact. I noticed when after cutting it off. So I'll have a close-up picture there. There's a knot here that I'll have a picture there, but you can see that the fibers are a little bit separated. So what I think I'll do on this particular knot here is I'm going to apply some crazy glue to it and just make sure that that knot tail stays together. So I've completed the mains, and earlier I mentioned how tensioning the string actually caused the string to ghost. So I'm just going to run this other piece that I'm going to use for the crosses that hasn't been tensioned yet. I'm just going to run it through to give you an idea of the comparison of what the strings look like before and after tensioning. And I'll have another picture here of what I did with the Babolat strings, and you'll notice that the strings, the mains and the crosses, are more uniform in appearance. As I'm weaving the crosses and I'm pulling the string through, the amount of friction on the coating on the outside of this string feels about the same as the Babolat VS. So the coating on the outside is somewhat similar. So I have a picture here of the two rackets. The bottom one is with the Babolat VS Touch, and the top is the PROV5 Plus. So you can see how the top one is a lot wider, and the bottom one is still somewhat, it's translucent. The goal when working with N.G.W Gut is to make the strings look pristine. And what I mean by that is you want the string job, or at least the strings, to look the same as when you open the package. So in the case of the Babolat VS Touch, it did start off whiter in color and appearance. It was translucent. But in the case with the Babolat VS Touch, I was able to keep this pristine because of the fact that it's still translucent. But with the PROV5 Plus, because of the fact that every time I pulled tension, it was ghosting, all of the strings did turn uniform in color. Unfortunately, it's opaque looking, and to me, it just doesn't look as pristine. Now that I'm done stringing all four of the rackets, I'll go ahead and take some initial readings, do my play test, and track tension maintenance, and I'll see you back in 4 weeks. Welcome back, and thanks for joining me on this 4-week journey. So what I did is I strung 3 rackets. The first one here with Babolat VS Touch at 50 pounds. Then I have these two at 50 pounds also, but what was different is that I strung this one at 10% pre-stretch. And this orange and black was just a label on the racket, so I could tell the difference. And the readings that I was taking was the RDC string bed deflection and the IART 300 dynamic tension, and then I also converted into string tension. All right, so this first set of readings here is the initial string bed deflection and DT readings that I took right after stringing. And what was interesting was this one came out at 56 and this one at 57, but this one was pre-stretched to 10%. And this one was the lowest when I didn't pre-stretch it. So I thought that was interesting. And it was a good thing that I did these two that way. And then, of course, the DT matched up. So you got 35, 35, and then a 33 here. All right, so here's the day 1 readings. And from this point on, I'm going to pay attention to how these two rackets do since they started off pretty similar. And this third one here in the middle to see how it's going to be different from these two. So let's take a look at the string bed deflection, 11% here, which is greater than the 7. And this one is the greatest because of the fact that, again, it started off pretty low and it wasn't pre-stretched. So it would explain why this one was the highest. The DT at here at 33, which matched up here, that was good to see. And this one was even lower at 30 DT. Now we're at week 1, and again we're going to take a look at this one here at 16%, and this one dropped down to 19%, and that's the difference between this number and the initial. So even though this started off at 7 and this one at 11, this one dropped down after week 1 even greater than this one. And you can see this middle racket here at 24%, and the DT is also a little bit higher, 15 versus the 214s here. All right, so next I'm gonna just skip over to week 3 because what I was finding was it was pretty similar in terms of the readings. So it went from 16, it stayed at 18 and 18. The 14% stayed here, and on this racket, 46, 46, 46, and all the DT readings matched up. So that was good to see. And even on this middle racket here, you can see that it dropped slightly from 24 to 28. It stayed there on week 3. And the DT reading stayed the same. All right, so finally we're on week 4, and we're gonna again take a look at these 2 rackets first, and I have it highlighted in blue because I wanted to note that these 2 stayed exactly the same in terms of the DT reading, and again this number here was just converted into string tension, so that was good to see that these 2 matched up. This 2-hour indication, that's how much time that I actually hit with the racket. So I initially hit with it about 1 hour here, and I did another hour towards the end of this playtest. So the other thing to notice is the string bed deflection. The final reading came out at 45, 45, and the percentage of loss was comparable at 20 and 21. Now let's take a look at this middle one here. So you can see that the string bed deflection at 39, it was a 28% loss, and the DT reading ended up at 28 versus the 230s with a 15% loss. Earlier I mentioned that I did string up 2 other rackets with 16 gauge in the NG PROV5 Plus, and I didn't pre-stretch those, so the numbers came out more similar in terms of the initial readings to this one. But what I found was interesting throughout the 4-week period, the amount of string bed deflection and DT reading loss was more comparable to these 2. I think it was due to the fact that it was 16 gauge and it didn't stretch out as much as the 17 gauge. Before I get into my playtest, I did want to talk about my takeaway from these readings, and you probably can guess. When I strung up the 2 rackets with the NG PROV5 Plus, there was a definite difference between the 10% pre-stretch and the one that I didn't pre-stretch, and you can even hear the difference. Yes, so this is the tighter one, and during the playtest, I didn't really notice too much of a difference in the feel, but when I used the Babolat VS Touch, I could definitely feel it had a firmer feel overall. So if you want a firmer feel, I would go with the Babolat VS, and a softer feel with the NG PROV5 Plus. The other thing, and you probably know this if you play with Natural Gut, is that the strings get displaced, meaning that they don't snap back like polyester. So you can see on all 3 of these rackets how crooked the strings are, and I left it that way on purpose. So if you use Natural Gut for the first time, that's something that is part of using it, and you would have to straighten your strings in between points. But again, if you're using PROV5 Plus for the first time, I would definitely recommend pre-stretching it if you can on your machine at 10%. In summary, I'd like to wrap up with some pros and cons and some recommendations. So I'll start with the cons. I mentioned how the Babolat VS had a very pristine looking string job in the end because of the fact that it stayed translucent. So one of the cons I feel with the NG PROV5 Plus is that you're going to end up with a more whitish or opaque looking string job. And if you don't mind that, that might not be a con. The other thing with these strings is that you do have to take extra care on the tie-offs just to make sure that the fibers don't unravel. And I mentioned how to remedy that. Now for the pros. the price comes under $30. And if you go on their website, you'll notice that they have 2 other grades of gut. I didn't string the second one, but I did have a set of the lowest grade, and I definitely wouldn't recommend that. And I'd also like to thank Kevin Smith, the sales rep for N.G. Gut, for sending me the sets of string to do this video review. And the other thing was on the pro side is that, you know, it played comparable to the Babolat VS. It's just at a softer feel. So here are my 2 recommendations. One, if you're going to use the NG PROV5 Plus for the very first time, definitely pre-stretch at 10% on your machine if possible. And number 2, although I didn't cover this in this video, I think the PROV5 Plus would be a cheaper option, especially if you want to experiment with a gut hybrid setup. I would recommend it in the mains for the feel and snapback. Now, if you're one of those that actually tried PROV5 Plus, please leave a comment below. I'd like to hear how you feel about the strings. Thanks for watching. Happy stringing. And let your strings play.